You're welcome to the Policy Council. My name is Okwemi Agwaji. Today I do a comprehensive review of the economy, global and Nigeria, with one of the top experts in the field. We'll try to draw scenarios and outlook for 2013. And we'd like to go deep into the trends that will shape the future of this economy. Enjoy the program. You're welcome back. It's the Policy Council, and we're doing a comprehensive economic analysis and taking a view into 2013. Of course, I have the person I describe as the best qualified person to do that with me, Bismarck Rewani, economist, CEO of Financial Derivatives. You're welcome, Bismarck.
Thank you, Okwemi.
Okay, so let's start from a global review. What are the, you spoke about shifting trends. What are those shifting trends, and which ones do you think are dominant regarding the global economy?
First of all, politically, we have Obama back, we have a change in China, and we have the Middle East in some form of turmoil. Now, these are very important and significant shifting trends. Two possible outcomes as we go into 2013. One, the continued decline of U.S. influence, or the reemergence of the preeminence of the U.S. Whatever the outcome is, tells you something. Look, read the Breakout Nations of Brzezinski's book, The Strategic Vision. It tells you of two possible outcomes. One is that the reemergence of the U.S. Preeminence, and two, a continued decline of U.S. influence. But let us take the reemergence of U.S. influence, because the U.S. from 2001 to date has seen its currency lose about 36% of its value strategically, which means that the U.S. has become much more competitive. You see that the U.S. has become a net exporter as against a net importer. The U.S. has also reinvested significantly in innovation and creativity in Silicon Valley and so many things. Okay, so you have Facebook, you have Apple, you have Google, and all of this. Those are significant, making the cutting-edge technology. So what do you have in the U.S.? You have increased productivity, you have a much more competitive currency, and then you now have the U.S. shale gas and fracking, which makes that the U.S. is now going to be probably a net exporter. They'll be energy independent and become one of the second largest producer of oil. If that happens, then it changes the geopolitical as well as the geoeconomic scenario of the world. And you will see at the same time, China, the other country, there was a change in government, there's a new leadership, younger leadership, and they are facing a major challenge. They're becoming net consumers and importers as against export. So the export-led strategy is changing to a consumer-led strategy. And they will start having changes in terms of economic stratification within China. So, but if U.S. influence was to decline and wane, then one thing happens. There are certain satellite countries of the U.S. in different parts of the world who become victims or subjects of this weakness in the U.S. Remember, they said, first of all, you get rid of Caesar's aides before you come to Caesar. Now, who are these countries? First and foremost, South Korea. Okay. South Korea becomes a victim of North Korea and China. Taiwan becomes an issue. Israel becomes an issue. Mexico becomes an issue. And then, of course, certain parts of the European Union and Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Those become countries that come into play. My gut feeling is that we will see a re-emergence of U.S. economic power and influence. Not to the point of being dominant, but still to become the leader. The reserve currency continues to be in the U.S. hands, and there will be a resolution of the fiscal difficulties. But basically, that's what I see as a challenge. But
the continuance of U.S. power in a more multipolar world.
Yes, Nigeria's terms of trade with the U.S. are weighed in favor of Nigeria. But Nigeria's exports, Nigeria now at this point probably controls 21% of U.S. oil imports. That's come down to around maybe 7 or 8%. one. Two, Nigeria imports. Nigeria is the largest importer of U.S. wheat in the world. Hard red winter wheat. Nigeria is also an importer of U.S. spares for aviation, and that is Boeing and other things. Nigeria's reserves are principally $46 billion. Now 10 to 15% of it is now in Chinese yuan. So it is significant that the U.S. will be interested in Nigeria keeping its reserves in the U.S. currency, because that's good. It'll be interesting to see that the U.S. has an interest not only in Nigeria as a country, but as a stabilizing factor in the West African sub-region. The major difficulty Nigeria will have is that because a consumer has actually increased its production, the structure of the oligopoly called OPEC and the oil producing changes. Once there's a major producer and you increase, the power of the price leader becomes weaker and the power of the price takers becomes stronger. And if a price taker is also a consumer, it shifts the balance between your production and your price. The Nigerian economy is more vulnerable to production. The thing in a cartel, the moment price pressure comes in, the price leaders have to take a cut in production to maintain the balance. Is Nigeria going to be a loyal and law-abiding citizen of OPEC? Or is Nigeria going to take its own destiny in its own hands and do something different? Knowing very well that by increasing production, we can bring the cartel into, shatter the cartel, and that could be the beginning. So that's a major threat.
Let's take a short break. Those are sobering thoughts, and I'll be right back with Bismarck to further look at all these economic issues and dimensions. We'll be right back.
My name is Femi Durojayi. Welcome to the New Lagos, where things are improving every day. I work on the island and live on the mainland, but that's no longer a problem. With improved roads, I get to work faster. Sometimes I even leave my car and use the BRT bus, which is comfortable, fast, efficient, and reliable. After a hard day's work, the nights and evenings are even more fun. The streets are better lit, and the city is more secure, so I can catch my phone in peace. I pay my taxes because I want to continue enjoying the good things a big modern city like our Lagos brings. So it's my taxes that makes them real. Have you paid your tax?
Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
You're welcome back on the Policy Council. I'm Okweme Agbaje, and I still have Bismarck Rewane with me, one of Nigeria's foremost economists. Bismarck, the presidency is in the midst of a very critical privatization of power assets, but it has thrown two successive uncertainties into the process. One uncertainty over the transmission contract, probably the most critical element of the power chain, and then some days back, it fired the head of the privatization agency. I saw some of your comments on Bloomberg on this. What did you think?
I found it very curious because in soccer, I would have said this an own goal. Okay, and I think that it's, you see, when you throw uncertainty into a process where nobody knows what the outcome is, you actually increase the risks and increase the price you are going to pay. I don't see any reason. If you are going to fire the privatization czar for that moment, you could have done it well before the process started. Once the process has started, you are stuck with that person to the end. Now, nobody knows what it's all about. Everything is back in play. But I'm optimistic. This sector is so important, and the assets in question are so valuable that we will get through. But it's only going to be much more expensive for Nigeria.
So we'll pay a price.
The disruption caused by the policy intervention in terms of personnel changes is more than overcome by the potential of the industry and all that. Well, basically, at the end of the day, what is going to happen is that there's a change of ownership. And whilst there's a lot of squabbling over who gets what, the reality is that whilst there's money to be made, there's a lot of money to be lost as well. So when you appoint or select the wrong persons, those persons stand a good chance of losing significant amount of money and be acquired by others. So even if you don't get any of these assets and you have the capacity, all you have to do is wait.
Just be patient.
Because somebody's going to
and
stumble.
Be the second buyer.
Yes, somebody's going to stumble and you're going to come and acquire that person eventually. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
But the benefits of a rearrangement of the industry structure of power in Nigeria has tremendous payoff in terms of GDP and productivity, which is key, because that is the key element. The productivity gains will also increase output at the expense of money supply, which means that inflation definitely begins to decline.
Okay, good news from power, like someone said, potentially the president's biggest legacy, if he can just see it through. Let's go talk about the petroleum sector, the PIB, its prospects of being passed, the complaints from the oil majors, the decline in investments, all of that, coupled with the global dimension you had articulated earlier, shows that we may have problems in that sector.
Definitely there are problems. The problems are that it's a mental adjustment. The group that put the PIB together and the circumstances under which the PIB was put is different from what it is today. We're in a strong position, a strong oligopoly, we're in control, we're one of 5 or 6 countries producing oil in Africa. The global demand-supply balance was in our favor. Everything was working in our favor. So our terms, our bargaining power was much stronger. Our bargaining power has eroded and it looks potentially weaker. Therefore, being realistic in altering your expectations is a very important thing. So there's a crisis of false expectations, 1. 2, there's a crisis of dynamics while we have a static view. I think that, but to Nigeria, there are 2 dynamics. 1 is investment dollars, 2 are production dollars. Every time you delay the PIB, you lose the investment dollars. Investment dollars will help show up and meet some of your foreign exchange requirements, while the production dollars will sustain it over time. What has happened is that production dollars have actually been sustaining things and have started declining, while the investment dollars are frozen altogether. Now the time between when final investment decisions are made and when the dollars start rolling is getting longer because there are alternatives. So I do know that 1 or 2 or 3 oil majors have moved their administrative headquarters without saying it to Ghana. And out of Ghana, they are covering Liberia, covering Ivory Coast, and covering the North, even covering Chad. That's very important and significant. So the Nigerian policymakers have to understand that our position is weakened, that we need to do things very quickly so we can get, and that our need for the investment dollars is more now than ever.
Let's take another short time out, and I'll come back to Bismarck on the subsidy side of the petroleum industry. We'll be right back.
Government wants our city to become a mega modern city. And so, government is providing modern markets for us to carry out our business. Now, this requires money. So, we need to pay our taxes to help government to help us. I pay my taxes. I hope you've paid yours. I pay. Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
You're welcome back, and I'm still with Bismarck Lewani discussing economic issues. Yes, I said we spoke about the investment side. What of this downstream side, the subsidy issues, deregulation seems to be stalled?
No, the reality is that the subsidy is only a byproduct of a regulated industry. If you deregulate the industry, the subsidy becomes academic in the sense that subsidy goes away. And it doesn't go away. You shift the subsidy from consumption to production. So the government will still spend that money, but spending on other things. The people will still get the benefit, but they get it on other things, which are measurable. Right now, the government is disbursing money, but the people are not getting the benefit. So it's a scam. Now, once we change the structure, now what is the effect of deregulation? The effect of deregulation is that people invest in the sector. There'll be new refineries, there'll be new petrochemical plants and all of that. And the price of petroleum products actually comes down because the transportation of the crude out there and transportation of the refined product is cut off, and there are benefits that we passed on. So it's a no-brainer. You know, it's just a waste of time. So it justifies itself, but you must incentivize the guys who are going to invest in it to be able to invest in it. The only way to incentivize it is to take off that subsidy. However, you cannot take off that subsidy as long as two things don't happen. One, you have to be credible. You have to bridge that trust deficit. Two, you have to explain what you did with the difference between 65 and 97 in the last 12 months. You must show tangible results. If you have no tangible results to show and you have no credible story to tell about how you have reformed yourself, then removing the subsidy in any form will be a difficult political sell. So what makes good economics good politics is credible leadership. But bad economics cannot be good politics. That's a transient. So what you're doing now is trying to make bad economics good politics, but that's only temporary. It becomes destructive, and what you can call dialectical. It destroys itself.
Okay, let's talk about the aviation sector. You seem to have data regarding what's happening there, and by all accounts, our domestic aviation sector is in a complete mess. The economics doesn't want to be working.
No, the economics is there. The structure of an industry. What you have now is an oligopoly which has become smaller, which is more tending towards. You have broad oligopolies, you have narrow oligopolies before you get to monopoly. Monopoly is the worst form, and the state monopoly is the worst form.
Yeah.
Now you have a highly regulated industry. Now basically you have a duopoly. Right? A duopoly means an arrow. Now, so they set prices, they dictate production, and the consumer gets screwed. That's what it is.
Exactly what's going on.
Now, the excuse is that aviation infrastructure is too expensive. The regulator is the one that provides the aviation infrastructure at whatever price he or she decides to use. Therefore, the Nigerian consumer or passenger or Nigerian traffic is being screwed by the guy who provides the aviation infrastructure and being screwed by the duopoly that is there. So you are paying one for the inefficiency of the duopoly. You are paying more for the inefficiency and fraud of the provider of aviation infrastructure. And then you are becoming more and more uncompetitive. The result is what? Lagos to Abuja and back is now 50, it's gone up sometimes 50,
almost 60%.
60% in a short period. Not because of anything else. That has happened when the price of crude has actually come down somewhat. So the industry structure has become less competitive. So typically what you do, you deregulate, right? You liberalize, and then you open up for competition. That's what it is. But in the aviation sector, we are going the other direction. Now, the government now says they're going to buy aircraft to give to the airlines.
Maybe you understand that.
Now, that's a bit weird. Because what you are doing, you are becoming a supplier. The regulator is supplying the operator. And that becomes extremely difficult.
And what are the terms of that supply? You take a loan from the Chinese. Do you give it to them as a loan?
No, but you are dealing with Embraer, which is the Brazilian.
Okay, the Brazilian.
But now the crew, the fleet they have
is to be financed by a loan from the Chinese.
No, but what makes it more interesting is that you have your stock of spare parts. You have a fleet already of maybe 30 aircraft, all Boeing. And now you are going to bring a new fleet, which means that both the engineers' training, both the spares, both the pilots' type rating, right, and the simulator and everything will now come from a new source. Meanwhile, you cannot discard the old one, so you are going to be having dual costs. So your average cost goes up, your unit cost goes up, and your revenue stays pretty much the same.
Which is a recipe for disaster in the future. Let's take a final time out, and I'll talk outlook for 2013 and across sectors with Bismarck Rivani. We'll be right back. You're welcome back to my final segment with Bismarck Rewane, and we're talking outlook for 2013. What do you see in politics, in economics?
Economics, one, the revenue profile will change. No question about it. Output will increase, oil production output will increase. The PIB will be resolved, and therefore the investment dollars will come to where
You're sure it will be resolved?
It has to be resolved. You know, out of necessity, not out of any altruistic moves. So it will be resolved. So investment dollars start to come in towards the end of 2013, but in the short run, it's not there. But investment dollars will be filling up a gap created by a declining oil price scenario. So there are revenue risks. There are also output risks because 2013 is going to be a political year in which the shifting trends will take its impact both in the north and south of Nigeria. That becomes an issue. But more than anything else, the gap between the implementation of the power reform is critical to the economic performance of Nigeria. The way it works is that the first 10% payment has been made, the second 10% or so, 20% is made, and then in all, between when you start and when you take possession of the assets, it's 180 days, right? Now, some of the guys are going to pay up front so that they can take possession. The transmission issues have to be resolved permanently because you can't generate and not transmit because the discos will have nothing to distribute. So if you can resolve the power issues early enough so that by January, February, we start seeing the effects, there'll be serious productivity gains. If those productivity gains manifest themselves, output increases, money supply remains constant, inflation begins to come down because of increased productivity. The other major variable is, the other constraint is road infrastructure. After the disaster of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and now you've broken it down into 2 contracts, whatever that means, we have to have an aggressive rollout program for roads. If you're going to concession them, go out and concession them to the guys who have the capacity to build and maintain them. Do that very quickly. There's need for very, very rapid decision-making process and assertiveness, decisiveness. There's no room for procrastination and dithering. So the outlook for 2013 depends on the determination of the President and the coordinating Minister of the Economy to go ahead, irrespective of whatever happens, to move along. The question of the subsidy becomes an issue. You have to be bold enough to do it. If you're not going to do it, then you know that it's going to be a big problem. This country cannot afford, neither can it be sustainable. So how you manage the politics of that becomes a key issue. So what are we looking at? We're looking at a situation where there will be increased revenues, there will be a threat to oil production, there could be a threat to the power reform if it's not decisively handled. We could see, I think that inflation begins to recede, and I think that we are going to have some challenges with the exchange rate as we go along, because the needs of Nigeria are pretty much continuing to grow. And therefore there'll be a need to do that. But more than anything else, there'll be major decisions have to be made. Will Nigeria have to borrow to meet some of its infrastructure requirements? The answer is yes. But borrowing comes with certain covenants and restrictions. Is the Nigerian political class willing to accept that discipline? If you are not willing to do that, then, but the reality is that Nigeria will borrow, I think, more than it anticipated. Nigeria will comply with with lender restrictions. So Nigeria will become a compliant member of the international financial community, and that will bring much needed discipline, which will lead to productivity gains. So the short-term economic story remains intact. The long-term risks because of how the political struggle, the struggle for the soul and heart of the PDP won, struggle for the soul and heart of the country itself, of the mass, the mass of the country, and then the credibility gap between the party in power and the government in power and the people, that has to be managed and bridged. And if all of those things are done properly, I think you will have a good and interesting 2013.
Well, I think a mixed but tending towards positive view from Bismarck.
I would say
is that a fair summary?
Cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic. Thank you very much, Bismarck, for coming.
Thank you, Akpayemi.
We'll be right back. In his words, Bismarck Lewane is cautiously optimistic about the economic outlook for Nigeria. But he makes 2 points. Political will is critical, and decisive leadership is mandatory. I hope our current political leadership will be able to seize the moment. Right now, the signs are doubtful. At the end of the day, we hope that for the benefit of future generations of Nigerians, we can make the changes required to make Nigeria a successful nation. Thank you for watching today's edition of the Policy Council.